Peugeot decide to call it a day. They'll stop British car production next year. The company is blaming high costs at Ryton near Coventry, where over 2,000 workers will lose their jobs.
For the Midlands and for the car industry, it's an absolute nightmare.
It'd take months to get a job now. Forget it, there's just nothing left here.
Of treating its British workers more harshly than those in France. Good evening. Peugeot has decided to stop producing cars in Britain. The factory at Ryton near Coventry will close next year. Over 2,000 jobs will be lost. Peugeot claim that production costs at Ryton are far too high, but union leaders are now warning that the effects on the local economy could be dreadful. First tonight, let's join Rory Kettlin-Jones, who's at Ryton.
Hugh, they've got a long and proud tradition here at Ryton of car making stretching back many decades, but in recent years this is the only car they've been making, the Peugeot 206. And it's fair to say the workforce here knew that this car was in decline, it had a limited shelf life. But still, when they were called in by their management for a special meeting this afternoon, the news they were given came as a big shock.
Yeah, see you next year.
The night shift at Ryton left this evening shortly after clocking on. They'd been sent home early to absorb some bad news from France. Peugeot has decided that a long history of car making here will soon be over.
I think it's a disgrace, basically. We've worked so hard in there, done everything they've asked for, and this is the reward we get. It's just a kick in the teeth again.
Coventry's about dead. I mean, I go back to my youth. I could walk out of a job in the morning and get a job in the afternoon. It'd take months to get a job now.
The Ryton factory has been making cars since the 1940s. Hillman, Humber and Sunbeam, just some of the names associated with the plant. Peugeot has been here since the late 70s, and only a few years back was boasting that it had produced a modern, productive operation which was exporting cars back to France. But now, with most of its supplies coming from the continent, the French company's taken a long, hard look and decided the numbers just don't add up for its British plant.
Ryton is the most expensive plant we have in PSA Peugeot Citroën, and that in the present circumstances, the market and of raw material cost, we cannot continue to produce in a too expensive plant.
Peugeot has decided it's got too many plants across Europe. The firm has 6 factories in France, 2 in Spain, and 1 each in Italy, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And demand for the 206 made at Ryton has declined. In 2003, they made 210,000 cars here. Last year, that had fallen to 130,000. These workers have been told they're losing their jobs because this is too expensive a place to make cars. But they believe this wouldn't be happening if this factory was in France. Peugeot insists that gearing up an old factory to produce new models after the 206 retires would be too expensive. But the workforce believes it's made huge efforts to modernise and has now been let down.
Ryton hasn't been invested in as well as it should have been over the years. And perhaps it is just back to British jobs being quicker, cheaper and easier to get rid of.
It's foreign owners who've given a whole new lease of life to Britain's car industry. But the French company which employs these people doesn't believe there's a profitable future in making cars here. Now, it should be stressed there are plenty of foreign-owned car companies, Nissan, Toyota, Honda, doing very well in Britain. But when it comes to new models and perhaps new factories, then Eastern Europe looks a much better and cheaper place for many companies to supply the whole of Europe than building cars here in Britain. Hugh.
Rory and Ryton, thank you very much.
Of 2 cars, why is the Peugeot plant in Coventry closing while the Honda factory in Swindon thrives?
Hello, good evening. Peugeot are threatening industrial action over plans to close the company's plant at Ryton near Coventry. More than 2,000 workers face losing their jobs. But why has Peugeot failed where other car makers in Britain are thriving? Here's Rory Kettlin-Jones.
Heading for an uncertain future. Yesterday, Peugeot workers were told their plant was to close. Today, their union promised to fight, but talk of possible strikes didn't get a warm welcome.
Get round the table and talk about it. We don't want to strike. We can't afford to strike.
I mean, we will fight. If we have to fight, we will fight. We don't want the plant to close. But, you know, personally, I don't think it's any good. They've made up their minds and that's it.
Inside, their union officials were still furious about the suggestion that Ryton was no longer a profitable place to make cars.
For many years, this plant has been incredibly profitable. Over 1 million 206s have rolled out of this plant over the last couple of years. They wouldn't have been here if it wasn't successful.
But while Peugeot is saying goodbye to Britain, other overseas car firms like Honda are still happy to be making cars here. So why does a French company find it impossible to make it work, while a Japanese car maker keeps pouring large sums into its British operation? It's not the car. The Peugeot 206, built at Ryton, has been a real bestseller until recently. But the French company says it's now too expensive to make this or similar models in Britain. The Honda Civic, built in Swindon, doesn't sell half as well as the Peugeot, but the Japanese company seems perfectly happy with the costs of building at its British base. For Honda, Swindon has been a good place with skilled workers to attack the European market, whereas for Peugeot, Ryton now feels like a fringe location. And there's another difference.
Well, Honda have an almost brand new factory on a greenfield site using the latest technology and the best working practices. The Peugeot factory is 50 years old and it's only really a satellite.
But for one worker who came to Peugeot from Rover 7 years ago, there's a feeling of betrayal.
We've all got to report to work tomorrow as usual, and that's going to be hard. Actually having to go back on the track to work for a company that's treated us so badly.
The cars they made here have been a success, but Midlands motor workers have found that foreign owners don't need them anymore. Rory Catlin-Jones, BBC News.